Gotta click that button first. Hello, and welcome back to the Geek on My Sleeve channel, where we learn how to human one book at a time. This is Geek Out number 133 over Gearing Up, Apocalypse Gate, author cut, book 3 by Daniel Schinhofen. Um, First and foremost, spoiler warning for books 1, 2, and 3, as well as this book I would rate mature, and has explicit content inside of it. So if that is not something you're interested in, move along.
Yes.
If it is
Yes.
something I It's a weird realm that I've previously not been like. I'm not a huge like romance person for books. I need my combat and my blood and gore. This is a different spin on erotica, so to speak. But
You're taking the words right out of my mouth. I was thinking about this going into it, where you know, uh, I like to sample a handful of more genres, including some that are a little bit more spicy. Um, and this was an impulse buy on one of Audible's many sales that I picked up. Read the summary, sounded very lit RPG esque, and we can do the genre conversation later. But I know that you've given me a hard time in the past about listening to some other spicy novels or just other genres because, I like to think of myself as a connoisseur. And even if it's not my vibe, I'm kind of curious about it enough to where, like, I'm interested, or correct me if I'm wrong, for you, you know, very much has to hit your palate as far as like you want your combat, having super fun in the lit RPG space. So I was thinking like I somehow managed to inadvertently get a couple different worlds and genres to collide for you in this series to where yeah, this one's a bit spicier. I wouldn't quite call it erotica, but
or
it's not
I guess
afraid.
that's yeah.
I mean, it does get graphic. Couple more quick disclaimers. We are reviewing a work of fiction. No, to my knowledge, no one actually got hurt, maimed, or climaxed. Unless, like that was in their own time and space. But we do not kink shame here. We're just having fun geeking out in the space. And this series
Yeah,
has
yeah,
been a lot of fun.
this series is not for everyone, but I guess general premise of what is to be entailed. If you are starting book one, it kind of takes a Bobaverse type vibe off the initial get go, where our main guy dies, he gets frozen. The company who has his frozen assets gets, loses funding, whatever. Someone buys him as a frozen head, decides to upload him into a video game, of which the whole series is Apocalypse Gate. Kind of starts off more zombie esque, and then that's where we really get into the lit RPG elements. And this is probably the my favorite part, or the best way that this book has done it, because it doesn't necessarily set like hard rules for this is how it is, because it's an ever expanding game still in development. And so it's allowed us to progress the story, continue doing our things, and it's a lot more character driven than it is plot driven. And the main comparison for that is normally at the end of a book, I need to know what's coming up next. I need to have the suspense. I need to have the, what's our next goal to achieve. Where book three probably did the best ending wise for like what we need to do next. But it, anyway, so I enjoy the development with the back end stuff and the
Yes.
ever changing, and yeah.
Yeah, I remember us talking about that with another one of our friends on a previous stream for this series where it's not technically lit RPG.
I I,
Um,
I think it,
but
it is,
yeah, I was just about to say like
but
looking on
the big
Amazon, like genres are kind of
uh,
subjective, right?
yeah,
The
yeah.
genres this is in is cyberpunk, science fiction, and dystopian fiction, which makes sense. But if you go a little bit further and read about the author, everything is lit RPG, game lit RPG. right? Talks about Daniel. Sorry, I've heard it. The last name Schneifenhofen
or
is a
Schinhofen.
Schnehofen is a self-published author in the burgeoning genre of lit RPG slash game lit. He published his first book, Last Horizon Beta, in October of 2016. So, in the grand scheme of things, like a relatively new author, though it seems like more and more of our favorite authors are newer to the scene. Has over 30 books out since 2016. We haven't read any of his other series, but Last Horizons, I know I've seen Alpha World, Binding Worlds, Resurrection Quest, NPC Lives. I think I've seen Aether's Revival and Dungeon Walkers. Um, yeah, I see. I mean, like, again, like genres are very subjective, right? Or marketing ploys. I would consider this lit RPG. It has the lit RPG gamification elements to it. Yes, it's science fiction because he's technically digitized dead guy, and yeah, yeah, I do see the cyberpunk.
I guess that's why I continued to read it, were for the lit RPG elements.
Hmm. It's fun and it allows, yeah, yeah, yeah. I enjoyed how they did it. Um, Going back, we both re-listened to the series before doing book three, which resulted in us not having enough time to go through book three 20 times like we like to. So apologies as we forget certain details. But with his AI handler, initially, I believe it was Kevin or something generic, was the first guy that died.
Or
And
like
then,
Steve or something.
or yeah, Steve, right? Something super
Yeah.
basic. Um, And in the beginning, you start out in kind of like a story mode and it evolves. Like first one was just survive, what, like a couple hours. And then he's saving Scooby-Doo reference, um,
Como.
saving the old lady, et cetera. Get to the point where um, open world happens, and that's when he wins his bet that for at least his AI handler, he's gotten the furthest. He's the first one to get to world mode. So like that was pretty much they had world mode kind of figured out, but they just got to launch, right? When he was rolling around. Maybe some of the other AI handlers had some players. We kind of talked a bit about players, other potential players in this book. Um, but he's not necessarily the one that first launched it, but everything's relatively new. So by having that as kind of part of the game mechanics, um, as things change in the story, it's not like the rules are being changed on us. And there's kind of that fight back and forth between the dev teams. And I think there was a reference in this book that his name became synonymous with like a couple curse words his AI handler was implying.
Yeah.
Um, and how the AI handler gets called out for having a bias of being too helpful and keep exploiting bugs. So it's like, hey, and I think that's, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things that you enjoyed a lot about it is um, gosh, another thing I appreciate about this book, which we're awful with names, to only have to remember Hero and Gothy as our main character and, side characters.
So,
Um, go
or
ahead.
backing up or sidestep here, a traditional MMO in my feels would be you have the starting town, and then you have to, it's only so hard, difficult. You go to a new area, and
Hmm.
things change and get more difficult. It's
Hmm.
this the variability in this is it's kind of like everything across the board is becoming more difficult, and it all ramps up. Um,
Hmm.
He's more just like making a bunch of towns or connecting a bunch of nodes so that he can passively continue to gain and benefit from them. and that's been like the very subtle underlining why we're doing select things. For example, book two, we're traveling to this town because of one of the people he saved, the grandma or whatever, who had the interesting
Mhm.
backstory that we save, and it's they have relatives who are over in this town, and then we have book two where we enter our first gate and figure out or find out about the Fae
Mhm.
and save them, and then the second or the third book here, it's pretty much like, hey, let's set some stuff up, and it's very whimsical, so to speak, where we're going to California to see trees. So it's very loosely driven. Or well, sorry, the ending of three, as of right now, we are going to the Elven lands to complete the quest for our new companion,
Yes.
which
It
was a twist and happened pretty abruptly.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes. So, kinda as we're talking about, like, the type of story, the genre, you were talking about how in book 3, it seems very character driven, how we're just going from settlement to settlement, one direction as good as
or
any's, I just wanna see trees. It's
the
the point I'm getting to is it's a love story.
sure.
I got lured in with game lit RPG mechanics, and it gives me some warnings on the cover about graphic material, BDSM, et cetera, and here I am, book 3 of this love story between Hero and Gothy and their other companions in a dystopian world, and I don't think you can convince me otherwise. We're listening to a love story
I
with our
probably will never
anti-hero.
admit it, but I I could see where
Come
you're coming from.
I mean, we have a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah, yeah, yeah.
combat, and then we have a lot of intimate moments between Hero and Gothy, whether it be, edging her all throughout dinner or, listening to her new dark elf companion that pledged her soul, uh,
I
to intimate
that's
moments
yeah.
talking about instead of having crazy wild sex,
I
they just spent a
hear
night cuddling.
it gets more intense, and I will be the judge of that. But yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Let me know which rabbit hole you wanna go down because I have so many thoughts and comments to that.
I you can take a pick. So yeah, we typical RPG, you normally have more like character development and growth for like skills, abilities, and whatnot. And the
Right.
way this is set up, the
The
XP
game
can be
world.
used for, healing, can be used for guns, can be used for upgrades, but there's
It's
kind
more
of
of a
like a soft cap.
currency,
Yeah, yeah, it's more of a
right,
currency
than an
where it's not
actual
so
personal
much,
gain.
and it's not linear, where it's not like, hey, you do something physical, you gain strength, you do whatever, and it's not directly
Right.
correlating. It's more whatever growth or development or whatnot, and that allows them a lot more freedom, as well as a lot of the other lit RPGs or MMO esque things. It's one town, and then we're building up the town, and maybe we go out and then we come back. But
It's
for this
true.
one, we are continuing to go through, and it's not 100%, but it very much follows the left behind god rapture mentality that we have at the very beginning of open world mode, and that's kind of been the vibe, like save as many as you can, and by telling people how the game is and updating them on the current state, as well as
Right.
saving their kids and giving
Right.
them extra XP to set up their settlement and freeing them from people who are oppressing them. But heads up, the one other, I believe he was a player, was Lister a player?
I only got through this book
I'm
once,
drawing
so
I'm drawing a
details,
blank, and
apologies, guys.
don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure we got more XP for him, and he had stuff that was pre-patch, but he had a different narrative where he was told it was the Native Americans that were, started the changes in the world, and that's why he had taken over the town and yada
Mhm.
yada, blah blah blah. But yeah, I'm pretty sure he's the first like actual player we meet, and it's interesting. It seems like the majority of the test cases are criminal or have some sort of a criminal background, and then we're fed a different opening line as well as just who they're around and
That
what all's going on.
I really wanna go down the rabbit hole sometime about just the different players and what makes Alvin, quote, "more successful" in this new world of being uploaded, and Bobiverse touches on it in a similar fashion where, like, only 1 in, like, 5 or something like that going from memory of the revivals, quote, unquote, throw
Or
whatever
yeah, the
game
replicants
mechanic you want in
actually,
there.
and
Right,
that's where Bob survives because he creates a VR
right.
environment and the dissociation and separation and
Well, it
whatnot.
it also goes into, like, some other character traits of why Bob worked well because, like, he had the lifestyle of being the small business owner, programmer, think logically, et cetera, like, those factors versus, like, the other ones that were successful, right? Were not successful. And with Alvin, like, a
It's
couple
very
steps in.
blunt, direct,
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, a couple.
survive. Yeah,
He is an anti-hero, right? Like, he's already gone through some incredible trauma and life experiences that he's kind of accepted some truths about the world, quote unquote. Um, and eh, I w- I wanted to comment earlier about how with this story it's refreshing because the main character isn't this overly competent, likable guy that's good at all this stuff. Alvin is very much our anti-hero in a way where he had a criminal record. He murdered his step parent or foster parent who was abusing him and other kids, like went through the juvie system, learned how to pick locks, just kind of, um, you know, not our quote unquote programmer like Bobiverse. Um, but when he comes to the world, in a way that kinda helps him just force himself through social interactions where he's like, "Hey, I'm here to complete a mission, don't be an ass to me. I'll be direct and blunt." He grows and learns better ways to handle things, as well as using Gothy later on in the books to kinda do the demos, have the good cop, bad cop vibe, but he doesn't really have a desire to stick at these settlements. He wants to
hmm
move on and keep moving forward because that's kind of the progression he got set on where like, hey, complete a couple story missions, open world mode, you know, you got to get out in the game world, do this stuff. And in a way, because he is that guy where he's always trying to find the exploits and the loopholes and builds that relationship with his AI handler who kind of helps guide him along and develops feelings for him and gets included as part of the party as he buys the upgrades and starts the settlements. Um, yeah, and then once it's no longer beneficial, he moves on. Like he does develop a bit of, hey, you take care of me, we're stronger together mentality, but just no nonsense. Sorry, if you're going to be abusing children, there's no place for you. Goodbye.
or
I'll get
yeah,
later
there's
later he starts giving them a warning. He's like, "Hey, anybody who's, and in a lot of ways when they're reestablishing order, which again, want to go down the rabbit hole on just like how many of these other programs and like the people who've been uploaded to the system and why they're doing it and how they're handling it and adapting to new circumstances like being dead and just a digitized brain. Here's your life now. um he continues to break the game, pushing the environment to be better, as well as generate all this revenue for this company that we really don't know a whole lot about.
We
They're just
don't, and
mice in
I was
the maze.
looking back through, and initially we were thinking it was for medical reasons, but now after going back through them all, it was never said, and they keep wanting to deny. So there's several different potential I, speculations that could be. I
Yes.
mean, it could be a matrix simulation where they're trying to improve their own
So
AI.
many
Yeah,
things.
it could be a bunch of different things, but
Yes.
I oh, lost my train of thought.
You were talking about how they get the upgrades at the home base
Or
and
so yeah, that is one of the
all the
elements.
fun ways that kind of like breaks the whole world, right?
We officially get our PG-13 adult dungeon, is all I will say, and
Only
that
13?
is a thing. Um,
Yes.
and that's where this book does a good way of like, while we're in the actual world, it feels apocalyptic. We get to see the mutations of the animals and the variations of gates and attacked by dragons with a modern apocalyptic twist of now we've got a Humvee and we've got our AI firing, our gun off the back and just
Cyberpunk,
like all the
traditional
variations
fantasy.
there. But
Yeah.
then we have the, I guess if you could say this is a love story where we can enter a portal where no one
I'm
else
saying it's a love
can
story.
enter as well into Hunger Games-esque, or you're viewed at all times and that's a thing. So now you're, doing stuff outside, and it's a nice way to separate it, as well as it gives room for development. And one moment that towards the end with our addition to the party, they were Alvin was basically like, "Hey, Jarvis is, I can't remember her name.
We'll
The
just call
dark
her
elf
Mousy. That's what she gets on her hat.
is
The mouse
the
that
dark
speaks.
elf's um personality expanding, and they're like, yes, she initially was just supposed to play her role and be an NPC for whatever, but because she is a critical thing, she's getting additional, I forget the verbiage,
Here
but
he
more
is
brain space
breaking the
or
game
more
again.
dedicated bandwidth to her developing her backstory and her personality and all of that. And I want to say book one, the old lady who Alvin ends up saving, um, I believe
I
she's
think Terry,
based off of someone's relative, but
their
I'm almost under
ancestor.
the
Yeah, yeah.
impression that everyone who is in the world was a failed player, if that makes
I could
sense.
I could see it. Like
Because they
we don't
could
know
stick them in
how
any
many.
style of environment,
Yeah.
and that's the only difference. So, like, for your first life, you're a main character, or you get the extra privileges. For your second life, you're an NPC. For your
And
third life, you're a
like
monster.
again,
I don't
like
know.
we could do a whole stream of just fun potential fan theories. But it's implied there's an ulterior motive to this. It's not just about making money through views. It seems like they're doing research on
Are
why it works out, and what if part of that is learning about the differences between these characters, and then if you already got them uploaded data wise, um I mean, they tell them there's one life, but like they still have it on their servers, right? Or whatever those servers look like.
Oh yeah, and you can get extra lives and the whole Jarvis thing for
Yeah,
many people
yeah,
didn't make it all the way through, or how many different iterations running at different time scales or entering different. Yeah,
absolutely.
and anyway, a lot of potential for expansion, as well as all of our people used to be real people. All of our current things we're running into are pretty typical, mutant scorpions and snakes and catfish and blah blah blah. But we've also had
Close
the
enough
the
to their experiences of, like, not completely mind-breaking, but it's also this major disaster in this, post-apocalyptic world. You either go to a settlement where you're more likely to survive, where Alvin and the other players are the only ones that have these powers to bring them together, and what that looks like. Um, and yeah, yeah. I wanna go back a bit to what we were talking about with the home base and Gothy and Mousy and Hero. He starts out in book 1 very much just that, for lack of better words, like scum of, troubled childhood, super abrasive, super antisocial for obvious reasons. Um, Plus with his stats, everyone like every time he quote bumps up his stats, people are more inclined to him. And it also makes you wonder, like, if in the game, um, when they increase their physical stats, what that does to a person in the game. Well, what about their like charisma and their like other type
or
stats?
yeah,
Does
we
that
we see
actually
that in
feel
book one where
but
he
with
bumps up his personability, and they're like, I don't know what it was, but I want to
yeah.
trust you more.
But then we have Gothy, who's supposedly just an AI, right? Is what we talk about, and we have some like breaking, different paradigms where they can talk about it outside of where it's not just like, hey, I don't understand this. Like he talks to these quote NPCs and it's like, hey, the world it's not here anymore. Welcome to the crows are our friends and there are dragons in the skies. You
Yeah.
know, don't don't abuse people, don't rape people, don't take other people's stuff and contribute, and you're good to stay. Do any of those
Or
things, you get a bullet to the head,
and
right?
I thoroughly enjoy or appreciate how each of the settlements is coming out differently, so to speak. So
Mhm.
you have like the initial one, Wild Bill's Holdout, and that's very, I would
You remember that one, huh?
say, old Southern style
Yeah.
mentality, gruff,
Fought in Nam, you know
management, and that's kind of a very consistent underlying factor. A lot of them are military esque veterans, which is a thing. And then you have the
your
current
preppers.
settlement where it's similar, yet it's different. And then you have the one that the or sorry, the first settlement we were in after the Fae, where it's similar. It's still a bunch of veterans, but it's more, I guess, family or community based versus the one family and
Mhm,
then a bunch of randos.
mhm,
And then we have the one that he saved from Lister's men, where Lister
right.
was essentially ruling with an iron thumb, and you get a bunch of I can't think of the right word, filthy casuals or normal people, however you
Mhm.
say that nicely. Um,
I
and
enjoyed the
they're just
Thor and
being crushed
Ragnarok
under the
in book
thumb.
2.
Or yeah, and you get all the extremes, and
Yeah.
then they've got more of a council mentality. But at the end of three is really where I hope book four and such, just expand and extend, because we're gonna go through the gate to the Elven lands and all that they hold, which I also am under the impression will be going under massive overhaul of the apocalypse and the variations, or it's just a more hostile environment to begin with. And I'm very interested to see the interplay there between setting up trade routes, between variation in abilities. We currently have where, for example, the blades can only be used by a I forget her name, specific class, so to speak.
Mousy. I think it's like
Mm,
literally Blade Dancer is the class or whatever, something like that.
yeah, but then there are
Yeah.
other variables that they can use, such as
Mhm.
the, shaman thing, and maybe he kind of kicked that off after defeating Lister and talking to the shaman, and then they had that
Mhm.
little side quest snuck in there where they found loot, and the loot was an orb, and then they took it to the shaman, and we had the fortune, which I got a kick out of because it's always very vague, and it's whatever you take away from it, but sometimes less is more.
Mhm.
But yeah, I've been disappointed so far in the I don't care how big the room is, I cast fireball mentality.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's okay because now we're going into Elven lands and hopefully we get a couple, bubble shields and fireballs and don't
Yeah.
bring an arrow to a gunfight and such.
With your theory, or not your theory, but the theory you talked about of all people being actual uploads, how do you think that plays into the different species? Because we kind
So
of
I
foreshadow
would
it in book
think
one
it
with
would be a baseline human and or AI with
they're not aliens.
generated lore influencing it, such as a D&D manual of what a elf is into we obviously have millions of personalities downloaded into
Yeah.
our server.
Are these the like closed beta and alpha phase where like they just didn't survive, so now you're going to go to the other casts when we go into the other world and we'll
Mm,
assimilate you based off of what makes the most sense, like matriarchal society, easier for you to adopt to this type of lifestyle structure with some minor code.
I would think it would
Or
be more random number generator just because I like
okay,
that. But
yeah, that would be easier and probably more scientific to give them all a fair shot, right? Like just blind random. Couple 100,000 of you guys failed. Let's throw you in here. You know, you're going to be a dwarf. You now have a beard, regardless of your gender. You're going to be elves. You're going to be,
yeah, and it's always like ever expanding. So let's say they win another bid, get another windfall of other
oh,
brains that they're going to melt into assimilating into insert computer term that makes sense. And boom,
yes,
new race.
hand
Yeah.
wave, yeah,
But
or
also, we
recycle.
have seen there are some like true NPCs like Mousy initially was only casted a role to do her part.
Was she?
But
Was she?
now
I
her
mean, you could be
persona is
given a job.
expanding because
Hmm.
she's given more personality bits or bytes or whatever.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I
Hmm.
I think some of them are truly fake and some of them are failed experiments,
Ooh,
which
that's
is
so
just
harsh. Fake? What is even real in this world? They're all just code,
okay, true
bro.
perception is reality.
um, but yeah, couple rabbit holes ago. Alvin, our anti-hero, very antisocial, et cetera, learns to care with Gothi, right? And how just all the scenes we have of them talking about not realizing they could ever feel this way and be the Harley to my Joker and oh, who's my favorite little sociopath. Um, and then expanding that with Mousy. Um, we're only at book 3. I think it's up to 9 now.
Or I thought we had more than that.
I thought we had more than that too,
I thought we
but
had like 11.
oh, I'm looking at the author's cut. Let me look at the
Or that's
regular.
another side random tangent. Like I
Go
hear
for it.
abridged or unabridged or author's cut. Like, I understand the verbiage, but unless there's going to be a not author's cut or additional editing, it's extra floof that just makes it
It's
long for my
it's all
titles.
marketing. It's all marketing.
But anyway, that's semantics, not
Authors
relevant. But
have bills to pay too. Go out, support your author. No shame in the library game, but as much as I spend on audiobooks or even just buying directly from the authors themselves, support them, keep putting out the content. I love how, you know, authors like the one for this series, 30 books in the last 6 years. We could shout out a number of our favorite authors. Like, thank
I
you,
think that
thank
seems to
you.
be sidestep. The name of the
Patreon,
game is density,
yeah.
right? Across all
Well,
genres,
just
for
like any
movies,
skill
for
set,
books,
right? They
for
say it's 10,000 hours to be a master. How else are you going to get good at it besides just doing it, right? Putting out the content. Um, and we do hop on here, we do rate and judge and talk about the books. Um, but we can appreciate the fact that new authors aren't going to be as polished, and it's so rewarding to get later in the series and just see the difference in their writing 10 books later, 20
and that's
books
where
later.
this book has a lot of openings to not break everything, but
Hmm.
add adaptations or additional things to progress.
Absolutely. So if authors are going to do side quests, like, you have to go all in. If I'm going to read, more lore building, um, yeah, yeah, make it worth it. But that's a side tangent, and you're making faces. So back back on the beaten path. Where are we in our quest line for book 3?
So, book three, we open up with we're in the settlement that we save the kids. From the Fae, we have changes to the world, and then we end up going with the can't remember his name. I want to say Sean, who's the leader of the settlement now, to skin the Drake. We think everything's hunky dory. We have a mini boss battle with ants that pop up. We defeat that. We give up our loot so that we can get good with a bigger haul, which turns out to be an army depot. We collect people. We run into some zombie clowns, and that's why that town was beeped from the beginning. And then we pick up some uh, exotic dancers, which end up being traumatized at the army depot. We barely survive, almost getting absolutely destroyed by a dragon. We pick up a Humvee, which is part of our loot. We continue, or we take a break. After taking a break, when we pop back out of our room, we end up getting uh, blindsided by Lister's men. We're not going to attack them, whatever, whatever. We play the song and dance. They're obviously not playing around. We take them out, and then we have more that are coming after us. We run away in the Humvee. We get split from the Mustang that Jarvis is driving by the dragon. And then we end up finding the town that Lister was taking care of. Of course, we've broken more of the game because of the environmental rune. We play dumb, enter the city that's owned by perceived to be another player. He is a tax horde and essentially gouging all of the civilians there who are basically doing what they would already do. So the general goods or the kiosk manager used to own a shop, and the person who is in charge of the food and cooking used to run a restaurant, and everyday average good people being taken advantage of. We end up taking out more of them as they come to collect the XP tokens. Oh, then we go and get people together and end up going after Lister himself. We split into two groups. The group with Gothy gets completely wiped out for the civilians, which is sad, but life. Almost get taken out by Lister, end up taking him out, which allows us to take over the settlement. They start up with, "Hey, we're going to do it," kind of a council, kind of Jedi Order council esque vibe feel. Pick up some sick loot. Then we go make amends with the Indians, who initially Lister's quest line or opening was basically like, "Hey, the Indians are the reason all this is happening." And they wiped out the majority of them. Get our side quests continued by giving the orb to the shaman. Says a lot of vague stuff and is now, I'm under the impression, now essentially going to be giving magical powers to other people because I wish I pulled it, but the line is, "I can teach anyone who believes in a higher power." And he basically says, "Yeah, you guys don't believe, so I can't help you. I can't give you the power." And they're like, "Okay, well, good enough." And then, of course, our main guy, Alvin, says, "Hey, if you go past these locations, I'm sure there are people there who want to protect their families and would believe in blah, blah, blah." Foreshadowing potentially and or theory crafting. I do see Gothy's brother becoming a mage esque, or at least like buffer, magic of some sort. I would be disappointed if the D&D nerd doesn't get some magical prowess, but that's okay. I'm sure these books have already been written. Might be, yeah. Anyway, so we defeat the shamans, go on about our way. We realize there's another gate open, and it has dark elves and light elves or whatever attacking. Dark elf is basically got, and then says, "I would give my soul to whoever can avenge me," or whatever. Gothy takes her up on the offer, and then that's how we get a addition to our, I will say, party. Um, Several other words come to mind, but not at this time. We're at the point where we pick up her dead companions because the Dark Elf needs to complete her quest to her matriarch of, this portal opened or the gate opened and she went through, but she has to report what's on the other side. We do know that we are walking into possibly 100 on each side, and they are divided by male and female, or the light is primarily male and the dark elves are primarily female. Um, of course, they each specialize in different prowess, such as the men who are the light elves have more magical prowess, as we saw with the shield they put up. The dark elves or the females are stronger blade dancers, so to speak, or more physical prowess as far as we have seen. And yeah, that's where stuff progresses. We are about to go through to the gate to the Elven lands, possibly in the midst of yeah.
Yeah, solid summary, by the way. That was well done. Um, I'm looking forward to the next book and just going and playing in a whole new sandbox. Would be down for adding our D&D nerd, the twin, to the party as a mage. I'm also looking forward to, like, eventually when we go back, right?
Or
Like,
I
just
don't
seeing how
think
the
we're
first
really
town
gonna be
scales.
going back because we currently have all of
Eventually,
the
I mean,
world, or
just look at
the
the
only
scaling
way we are
mechanics.
going to go back is if we unlock teleport
Thank you,
and we
thank you. That's
start
what I was about to say.
teleporting
Like, just
between
look at all the
settlements.
new
And it is
goodies we
set
get
up to
and
do
unlock
so,
it.
and
Because you can't
we
even see down the trees, right? Like, you have to unlock something before they'll let you see the other stuff, allowing them to add, like, indefinitely, right? Like,
yeah,
you
and
know.
also in this book, they added the auction house, and of course, Alvin's already exploiting it with old tricks where you list something for an outrageous sum, but then you have your other account or another individual buy it for that outrageous sum, thus transferring select things because money
Gosh, he's just helping
transfers.
the dev teams out so much. They should give him a salary of XP for being like a QA tester for this game.
But
Or
yeah,
like his
I see teleporting being a main thing, and I could see him taking a book. That's all I'm going to give you to
mm,
go back to previous
mm,
settlements and beef them up, help them out.
or in a future gate when the technology is really good because we're going back to like bows and arrows, right? We're seeing some like really primitive
But
stuff.
they have the magic. So currently we have two
They
magic
have
paths
the magic.
opening up for us because we have the shaman completed the side
Hmm.
quest, gave him the orb. He's now going to train people to magic who believe in a higher power. Uh,
Hmm.
Anyway, and then we have the elven lands that we're about to go into, of
Yeah.
which have slotted, I forget the terminology, but essentially you can activate it whenever. And current one we have, you can activate a bubble shield around you for duration, and you either use it or you can swap it, but you lose it.
Big step
Yeah,
up from the meat shields that they were using. Um,
or it's kind of forwardly backwards, which might as well be
tell
my
us
catchphrase.
yeah, tell us more.
Between initially the hat protected Alvin's face. Okay.
Right.
Then they went back on it, and now if you get shot in the face without the piece of armor protecting it, it doesn't. But then they went back on that and they said, well, if it doesn't inflict enough damage based off of your health pool, it doesn't actually show or do real damage, and changed up the healing. And this is all fine. And this is what I'm enjoying in the sense of progression because it gives the author free reign to make adjustments as long as he directly is like, hey, this is what happened. This is an update. This is a cause and effect. But
Yes.
now we have
He
a bubble shield that protects everything. And I am still waiting for my I don't care how big this room is, I cast fireball moment because of my lit RPG needs.
if there's a way to do it, Alvin will find it, aka Hero. Um, and just to kind of add on to that a little bit, the author does it well with the updates, quote unquote, and when he tells the reader about it through our AI handler. Um, but it also makes the story a little bit more, I feel, newbie friendly because you don't have to have all the details and the rules figured out early on. Like it keeps it pretty simple, and then because of these issues, it allows the author to teach readers why it's working the way it's working, right? And how
Oh
we're
yeah,
able
he
to get away
doesn't
with
have
it.
to explain everything, but we get to it's a convenient way where normally throughout storytelling there's a nub or a new person, an experienced person, and we're watching
Hmm.
through the eyes of the nub, and this is
Hmm.
why everything is being explained, where he is more just critical thinking and analytical of WTF and inserting, hey, why did this happen? And yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. 100%. 100% well said, sir. Um, so I could gush on and on about this book, but I need to keep this stream a little bit, or at least closer to our typical 1 hour mark. Was there anything else we missed in book 3 that you wanted to talk on?
I Even if the adult material is not your forte, I learn in the sense of learning how to human would recommend it because there is a simplicity in this is what I want and this is what I'm going to get in addendum to the complexity of this is what I'm doing, here is your safe word. And that can be applied to many things in life, and safe words are a thing. But yeah, I'm excited to see where the Elven lands lead us.
Always, it never hurts to establish a safe word. And
Yeah,
again, we said no kink shame here.
we're
Uh,
good.
I
This book
I'd have to
is
go. I haven't like really given it a super deep analytical look, but this book does do a good job just introducing terms and other non-vanilla encounters, and it's a love story. We get those intimate moments between Gothi and him. Like, yeah, they break out the paddles, and she asks that she gets left with some marks to, remember the fun they had. Uh, but they also have very intimate moments where they talk about being safe and,
or yeah,
like
time and
doing the
place as well
aftercare
as due
and
to what's going on around you,
yeah.
after select events happened in the world, they understood that due to the trauma, it wasn't necessary to
Yeah.
add. Yeah, yeah.
No kink shame, and everybody deals with the apocalypse in their own way, right? And that's part of that story. As you see people learn and adapt and form their settlements and their companions and the different oaths they try to give as they meet new friends, setting healthy
I
boundaries, talking about them.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about the whole leader whatever power thing. I felt like it should have just been a thing, and it is someone who isn't game savvy attempt at making things, but I like the enforcement of the system, but also
That's true.
it seems exploitable in several senses where, as far as I know, they never left the party that went to the depot with them. So unless there's a proximity thing I missed, he could continue to be getting lion's share of the XP of their kills and of their other things. Like I know
They
he already
have
gets
to they have to
passive
consent
XP.
to it.
Well, yeah,
Like,
yeah. Or well,
we
no, I
do
guess that
see
was part of the terms. It was at
exactly,
for the
exactly.
depot, and okay,
There's
okay.
ways to
Yeah, that's
manipulate it, and we've met a couple assholes in this world. So we saw with Mousy, our new dark elf companion, she said the words, but she didn't truly process the words because she lives in, the matriarchal society.
or
So
as
men are
well as
beneath them. So
or
she repeated what Gothi said when making the contract, but it was only after she fully said it, or at least so it implied. So people could be like tricked or coerced.
but
Um,
the other aspect of that was the I can't remember when they unlocked the translation power. I remember them doing it,
right.
and that's
Definitely
where
helpful.
as a learning how to
Do you wish
human,
you could buy translation power?
or so my comment is the meme that I keep seeing where it's like, "Oh, you watch anime dubbed, and it's like, "Oh, I watched it subbed," and then you get the overly animated person who is like, "I watch it with no sound at all." And it's
Lip
just
reading that.
so what I like to do is I'll watch it dubbed with subtitles on, and they don't match up, and
It's true
that is where
because it's not a
cultural
one for one.
differences are variable, and intention and prior environmental knowledge. So for simplistic example is, slang.
Or
There's
colloquialisms or,
yeah, yeah,
like
slang between, or
memes.
just emphasis on how to say a word and yeah, so on and so forth. But I'm curious to see if the author takes liberties in adding complexities to translation. But I struggle with English to English, so
There's different dialects, right? Like, even just between the generations. Um, yeah.
true, true.
I'm I'm enjoying the space and the world and playing in it.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a series worth continuing. I know it's not for
I
everybody, but
I got Peter to listen to a romance story, a love story. Yes. Victory. Victory. Let us know in the comments below. Do you consider this a love story or not? We'll ask you guys. Um yeah. Good time to do house cleaning, some quick plugs. Uh Follow us on social media, Geek on My Sleeve. We
oh,
are starting to ramp some of those pieces up. We are well ahead on our schedule for upcoming geek outs, though some of the later months may be subject to change, but the next two are hard set, and we're sticking with Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Right, Pete?
currently, yeah, yep. And next up is the Perfect Run 3. Uh, so for those of you who don't know the series, I enjoy it. I'd recommend it. It's not quite lit RPG. It's kind of it's apocalyptic, but people get powers, but not everybody has powers. And I enjoy it. The main character kind of feels like Deadpool-esque, like fourth Wally. And the main character's powers are essentially Schrodinger's cat, where he is both alive and dead. It's hard to explain without spoiling too much of it, but I truly it's a unique spin on kind of like Groundhog's Day, where you relive the same day over and over, but it's done so uniquely that I was not expecting what happened in book 2 and what happened in book 3. Um, yeah, yeah, it was thoroughly enjoyable. I would recommend the series. Um, yeah, it's a little more outside of our normal vein. Any comments on Perfect Run 3?
It was suggested by one of our friends, always taking book suggestions. My wish list is a couple hundred long, and whenever they go on sale, we pick them up. This has been a lot of fun. I definitely agree. It has a lot of kind of gamification mechanics to it. Um, but yeah, I'm really interested to check out his other series that he's done because I believe that one is actually lit RPG, and I enjoy the writing a lot. The main character's a lot of fun, kind of like a Deadpool meets video gamer.
Yeah, and then after that, we're continuing the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, uh, the Dungeons and Arcadists Cookbook, Book 3. This is another fun series. If you don't know anything about it, it is kind of like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy meets Hunger Games because, as unsuspecting humans, apparently we failed to file the proper paperwork, and now we have an alien race that is here to collect resources. They decided that we have to, if we want to take over our own resources and or talk to the higher ups, we need to complete a dungeon. It is more so comical because our main character gets caught up with without pants, running around in his heart-shaped boxers, and he has a companion, which was his ex-girlfriend's cat, who has become sentient and can shoot laser beams out of her eyeballs. So yeah, it yeah, interesting, more of a palate cleanser, whimsical book for me.
Yeah, definitely a lot more lighthearted. The author Matt Dinneman, uh, it was a surprise for me. He's probably up there as one of my favorite authors. Instant Buy. Um, the little bit I know about how the story came about, it was just kind of off of a whim. Taking a break from his other series, which I've enjoyed a lot. I want to say it's Savage Dominion. Um, yeah, book three, approximately 2 weeks out. Pick up the first couple. You guys have time. It's a lot of fun, a lot of laugh out loud moments, and I follow him on Twitter. He's got some fun stickers from this series. You want Princess Donut shooting laser beams. Oh, and then at the end, Sound Booth Theater is a lot of fun. The commercials. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I need to check if they have it on their separate exclusive app because I feel like they did a couple unique sounders and like they do phenomenal for the voices,
hmm
but
It's a whole production. It's great.
oh
I
yeah.
love it.
So I guess sidestep
Compared to the
back
cassette
to
tapes that we listened to in our
the
youth.
book we just did for Apocalypse Gate. We change auth or we change narrators, and that's fine. I understand timing constraints, I understand
Mhm.
financial, like, that's a thing. I still enjoyed the story, but in my mind, that takes the narration from, like, an A tier down to a B tier to where, like, I'm not going to overly promote the, "You need this in audio form" for me. I
Yeah.
don't enjoy physical books or Kindles as much, so narration is my life. But a production like Sound Booth Theater, which I'd recommend for all authors, is basically an S tier buy where they have multiple casted people for each of the voices as well as audio additions for sounders and musical scores and numbers and yeah, it's the difference between like a B movie and Star Wars with their symphony of epic
Yes.
sounders.
Yes. Yes. 100% agree. Um, yeah, I can't say it better.
But yeah, that is gonna wrap it up for this stream. Currently Wednesday 7 o'clock for continuations. Next one is The Perfect Run 3, and then in 2 weeks, Dungeon Arcol
Arcanist
Anarchist
Cookbook.
Cookbook. Yep. Thank you again, and hope to geek out with you here soon.
Bye.
Bye.